Yeah, go for it, Kev.
Okay, this year is dedicated for all the Cholim within Israel, and we're continuing with on the theme of Shemitah. It's not much long to go. Then we'll resume what we before this subject. And next question is: may I buy flowers for Shabbat during Shemitah? And the answer is, of course, you may buy flowers for your wife. I think that's very advisable for Shabbat. What would Shabbat be without flowers placed on the table? But here are the Shemitah conditions. Non-fragrant flowers and plants which are bought for beauty or aesthetic purposes. For example, hibiscus and orchids have no Kedusha Shvit and may be bought even without a special hechsher. Flowers with a fragrance, for example, roses and carnations, do have Kedusha Shvit and need to have a hechsher. Okay, what work is permitted or forbidden in my garden during Shemitah? It is forbidden to plant, prune, sow, fertilize, or do any work which improves your garden during Shemitah. However, work which maintains the garden and prevents its deterioration is permissible. Thus may one water the grass, flowers, or trees, but only so much as is necessary to maintain. One may also mow the lawn and trim the hedges, as well as clean the yard from garbage. Weeding, other than for aesthetic reasons or to save the vegetation, is prohibited. If one has a non-Jewish gardener who works on a steady multi-year basis in one's yard, many poskim permit him to continue work as usual during Shemitah without special instructions. So I think the ex-South Africans should send the guys that they used to employ just for a year to go work for them. Send them over from South Africa. I think that's a good idea, Damon.
Phenomenal.
Gavin? Okay, let's. Okay.
What did you say, Philemon, or did you say phenomenal? What did you say, okay?
Phenomenal. or simple, or tabu, or okay. If I have a fruit tree in my yard, may I eat from it? Fruit which grows during the Shvita year in one's yard may be eaten under the following conditions. 1. The trees should be declared hefker. That means ownerless, either by the owner making this declaration before witnesses, or by placing a sign to this effect in the yard. 2. The public should have access to the tree and be allowed to pick the fruit. 3. The fruit should be fully ripened before it is picked, preferably by hand. And 4. One should only pick an amount necessary for normal home consumption. Such fruit may not be sold. And I just thought of a question for us. Based on Bava Kamma, it said the public should have access to the tree and be allowed to pick the fruit. What happens if they die or they fall off the tree, or fruit falls on top of them and kills them, like a heavy fruit? What would be the? Would there be liability for damage?
I have no idea. I don't know. So basically, under the conditions you mentioned, you're allowed to during the Shemitah year. So it's not about tabu or taboo. You can.
Yeah. And you know what I said? We had a guy that worked for us. Actually, wasn't a great guy, and his name was Tabu, and he actually got rid of him because he had his hand in the till, figuratively speaking. I mean, they used to try their luck. So the one lady, the buyer, the ex-buyer, used to call him Taboo. So I said, no. So I used to say, is it taboo to call Tabu taboo? Try and get that one, say that one.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm a bit tired, but I'm awake. Yeah. So.
Yeah. All right. Well, that was a surprise. All right. Let's get started. Okay. So we are on 53A4 at the bottom. Actually, we had 53A4 at the top. So a related teaching is cited. Rava said, in a case where one placed a stone at the mouth of a pit that his fellow had dug, and an ox came and stumbled over the stone and fell into the pit, we have arrived at a dispute between Rav Nassan and the rabbis. According to the rabbis, the one who placed the stone there and caused the ox to fall is liable for the full amount of the damages, whereas according to Rav Nassan, each party pays half. Now, I want to ask you something. Arthur's writing, so he's off the hook. So I'm gonna then ask Kevin. Kevin, why is that?
Why is what that about this the thing with the stone? If someone trips over this, it's on the edge of the pit, trips over it, it falls into the pit. Who's liable? Is that the question?
Okay, so I'll repeat it because, like, we all tired at the end of a business day. I completely understand.
I mean, I've been over it. I've actually.
No, I know, but I'm saying this.
What's the question again, please?
I'm saying you've had a long day. We all have, and I completely understand that you would need the question repeated. I'm saying it's not an indication of anything other than exhaustion. I get it completely. So I'll repeat the question. I think the best way is actually to explain the situation. So Rava said, look, there's a case where there's a stone. Somebody placed a stone at the mouth of a pit. So that his fellow, his fellow Jew dug a pit. He placed the stone around the mouth of the pit, and an ox came and stumbled over the stone and fell into the pit. So this is a dispute between Rav Nassan and the rabbis. So if we hold according to the rabbis, the person that actually placed the stone there and caused the ox to fall is liable for the full amount of the damages, whereas according to Rav Nassan, each party pays half. I'm saying the rabbis are saying that the person that placed the stone there is fully liable, and Rav Nassan says both the person that placed the stone there and the owner of the pit are jointly and severably liable. So why do the rabbis hold that the person that placed the stone there is liable in full?
So the logic is, should I continue?
Yeah, sure, I'm listening to every word.
If the rabbis say that the person that placed the stone at the lip of the pit caused the ox to trip over and fall in, is liable, because if the stone wouldn't have been there, that wouldn't have stumbled and fallen into the pit. So
okay.
And Rav Nassan says the owner of the stone, or the one that placed the stone, and the owner of the pit are jointly liable. Because maybe because had the ox not stumbled over the stone, it wouldn't have fallen in the pit, but the pit killed the ox. So, and I think a lot of this, and I went a bit ahead and I tried to go over what we did, and a lot of it majority opinion seems to put the blame on the owner of the pit for death caused to livestock. A lot of you see that often. You see that on a few occasions.
Yeah. So, like, you're there. I mean, I'll just clarify it a little bit. But Kevin's there exactly. Knows exactly what's going on. So, Kevin, although the person that placed the stone there, one of the questions is the person that placed the stone there never actively put the animal in. Okay. So you could ask yourself the question, is that one of the questions that could come up is, listen, I gave somebody a fright by my digging. Okay, I gave somebody a fright. And they fell in forward, the animal, because it got a fright, right? And then the digger's not liable because he never pushed the animal in. Now I'm taking a stone and I put it by the mouth of the pit. Again, I never pushed the animal in. I left my stone there. So why am I any more liable than the digger, since it's my indirect damage that caused the animal to fall in? In other words, I'll never push the animal in. I left my stone there. The animal slipped on the stone, fell in the pit. Why is it any different to the sound of the digging that caused the animal to fall in again? The digger never pushed the animal in. Why would the stone case be any different? Still indirect, it's still grammar.
Is it also grammar?
Yeah. Well, it's indirect, yes. I never pushed the animal in. Left no object there, it slipped. Does anybody have a solution?
So I do. So it's because you created another pit.
Okay, ball. Explain.
So
obstacle.
A stone is another pit, is another an obstacle. In the public domain, you're not allowed to do that. So he tripped over that stone, which is not allowed, and that's why he's directly responsible.
Excellent. So that's exactly the answer we're looking for. What we say is, if you study exactly as Gavin says, there's something called an oven or tolda. So an is a classical ditch. It's a ditch. Whatever shape it is, you dug a hole. If you look at a tolda, it says if you leave your a knife, your stone or burden in the public domain, you've created a stationary hazard. And by its very nature, it's groma, it's indirect. Why? Because nobody forces the animal to go in, but because you've created an obstacle in the public domain, it's treated as though, because in other words, a hazard never damages through genuine action or direct action. But the Torah holds a person nonetheless liable. Why? Because you've created something that can create a hazard. It's different to something like sound that's indirect. Sound isn't mentioned in the Torah as something that would frighten an animal, whatever the case may be. That's different to actually creating something dangerous. So Gavin's 100% right. It's actually considered a tolda of pit, of a bore. That's excellent, Gavin. That's exactly why in this case you could hold the person liable. Okay, so that's spot on. So then the Rishonim wonder, so why does the Gemara then exempt the owner of a boar if the animal stumbled in his pit and is injured by striking the ground outside the pit? Okay. Do you hear the question, Gav?
Yeah, I think.
Say it again, please.
Okay, so basically, when we started at the top of the Amud, it said it exempts the owner of the boar if the animal stumbles in his pit and is injured by the striking ground outside its pit. Okay, because it's because in that case the animal loses its footing in the empty space at the mouth of the pit. Remember, we said what happens at in the beginning of this Amud, and we said that the animal has to fall into the pit in order to have accountability. That's how Shmuel got out of explaining if the animal fell backward in terms of impact, why he wouldn't cover in the Mishnah's case, because it hit its head outside of the pit. Do you get what I'm saying? So why is this particular case different? Because it's a little bit different in this case, because the one who dug the pit doesn't own the empty space around the pit, okay? But here, exactly as Gavin said, it was tripped on by an object. So in other words, it's seen as a different category, that there's two public hazards. That's why they're sharing liability. Exactly as Gavin said. So Gavin, well done. You were really, really on the mark. That makes a lot of sense.
Jesus, yeah.
So what the rabbi's saying, in essence, this is the bottom line statement, is the person that initially causes the damage is liable for all of the damage. That's what I was looking for. Whereas Rav Nassan says, if you are co-contributor to the death of the animal, you have to share the payment. That's in essence the difference. Does that make sense?
That's a better description. You initiated.
Yeah, so that's what we're looking at. Are you a co-damager or are you the initiator? That's at the crux of the matter. Okay, so you might say, well, listen, this is obvious. Why did I need the Gemara to go into this detail? So the Gemara said, look, you might have said something different. You might have said it's only there in the case where you have one ox that pushed another into the pit, that the owner of the damaging ox shares liability according to Rav Nassan and is fully liable according to the rabbis. Why? Well, if you have a look, there's an obvious reason. Because if you were the owner of the pit, Gavin, you can tell the owner of the attacking ox, okay? If not for my pit, your ox would have killed the damaging ox with the force of its blow. What do we mean? We learned a little bit before about this concept of shared damage and entire damage. Okay, so what we learned yesterday was as follows, is that if the ox galled it, lifted it up, and that ox from the sheer impact hit the other ox, you wouldn't have needed a pit there in order for that other ox to have died from that impact. So this was the argument with that, how do we work out Rav Nassan? Do we say that each one of them is an entire damager? The pit owner, because it's more than 10 tefachim deep, and the owner of the attacking ox, because the owner of the attacking ox hit it with such a force, it didn't need the pit to kill the other ox. So they each are individually capable of being lethal in and of themselves without the partnership. But the reason why the rabbis make exclusively the attacking ox liable is because that was the one that caused the damage. Even though the pit on its own, had the animal not fallen, been lethal, well, who put the animal into the pit? According to the rabbi, we look at the initiator. According to Rav Nassan, they are both equally liable. Because even if the other ox pushed it gently, the pit more than 10 tefachim deep is lethal. Therefore, each one in their entirety caused the death, both in its individual damages as well as by partners. Does that make sense, guys? That's what I want you to understand. Gav?
I've just reprogrammed something. Carry on. That's fine. I heard you everywhere.
Okay, so why in this case, I'm asking you, Gav, would you say that we have to learn this in the Gemara, in our case with the stone?
Why do we have to learn it?
Yes, because we would have said it. Oh.
Yeah, it's different to like with the guy digging. You know, it's too.
No. We're not talking about the digging here. We're talking about now a different case. We're talking about the classic case of Rav Nassan. That's how I know you lost track. So let me just repeat it again. I know you had to do something. There's no problem. I just need to repeat it. We're not talking about the case anymore of the digger and the stone. We've gone past that. What we're saying is
the one ox ran the other ox. I don't know why you asked. When you asked the question, you spoke about the stone. So I couldn't understand.
Yes, but I'm saying we've gone past that now to a secondary stage. So I'm saying you answered it correctly with the stone, and then the rabbi has an explanation. What is it?
No. I mean, you were just talking now about when the ox initiated it, and they're both directly liable because each one had their own sufficient force to kill.
Correct. And what I'm saying is, why would you think in the case of the stone that it might be different to a case of a combination of an ox hitting another ox into a pit? Why is the difference of the stone different?
The stone wouldn't kill, if there was no pit, the stone wouldn't have killed the ox. Excellent. So that's what I was looking for. Gavin, you did that was perfect. That's exactly it. So, Kev. I was listening.
No. That's.
I didn't realize it. Sorry. Okay, fine.
No problem. So what I was saying is, Kev. So Gavin's answer was spot on the mark. Why? What is Gavin saying? Gavin is saying that you might have come to the conclusion that the person that left the stone there isn't liable to the same degree that an attacking ox is. Why? Because had there been no pit, the stone wouldn't have had enough force to kill the ox. The ox, again, slipped on the stone, it would have fallen and got up. That's all. If not for the pit, so the owner of the stone, I could say to Gavin that had the pit, Gavin, listen, if my ox rammed Kevin's ox into your pit, I could understand why you would hold me liable for half the damage. But again, my stone there wouldn't have done anything without your pit. Because had your pit not been there, at the end of the day, my stone might have made a trip, but the animal would have got up, and therefore, why should I pay anything? It's your pit that created the death. It's only because you had a pit there that the animal fell in that there's liability. Therefore, why should I pick up the shortfall? My ox in its entirety wasn't the case here. It's a stone. It didn't do anything. It's your pit that did it. Therefore, you must pay. So what would the answer be to that argument?
For the person
the person that had the pit. What would the answer be for the person? How could you incriminate me about the stone? What would you say in return?
Are you saying the person that the pit owner wants the owner of the stone also to share liabilities? Is that what you're saying, or to be liable?
Okay, so you've got two people. You've got the owner of the pit and the person that left the stone there. And the two of them are having an argument. There's a dead ox at the bottom. So what's the argument? The person with the stone said, listen, I understand that we hold by Rav Nassan, okay? We hold him by Rav Nassan, that's fine. You say I should pay half the damage, and you should pay half the damage. Because all of a sudden, I'm, as the owner of the stone, am very nervous that he might go according to the rabbis. Otherwise, I would have to pay it all. So say, okay, let's go according to Rav Nassan. Then my little greedy factor comes in, and that little greedy angel is on my shoulder and saying, why should you pay anything? Never mind half. We've gotten away with paying half with Rav Nassan. Let's push the boundary a little bit further. And then the argument comes exactly like Gavin said, which is brought in the Gemara, which I don't know if Gavin he might have come to the conclusion on his own without the Gemara. He's smart. But I appreciate the fact that the Gemara highlighted the point anyway. And basically the owner of the stone can turn around, Kevin, to the person that had the pit and say, listen, my stone never attacked the dead ox with such force that it killed it. If you hadn't had a pit in the way, the animal wouldn't have fell to its death. If I had an attacking ox, we could hold like Rav Nassan, that the attacking ox hit the other ox with such a force, it would have died without the pit. Then I say we both liable. Your pit is 10 tefach, and I had an attacking ox. But my stone didn't do anything. If your pit had not been there, the animal would have, tripped a little and got up. So you, the owner of the pit, you pick up the fee. Now, as the owner of the pit, Kevin, what would you say to me? I'm trying to get a bit of engagement because I could read it to you, but I want you guys to think about it a little.
To counter.
Yes, I want to start to
put the stone there.
Gavin, by the way, do you agree with this approach that it's a nice approach for a chance? I'm just wanting the guys to start to be able to think and argue backwards and forwards. I mean, I can read all or remember it.
The owner of the pit will say the ox wouldn't have fallen if it wouldn't have tripped over the stone. So
exactly. That's the perfect answer.
Let me just add to that.
Sure.
I would have said, if I was the owner of the pit, I would have said to the guy with the stone, why did you put your damn stone in front of my pit?
Yeah.
Well, Kevin said that with clean language.
Depends if there was water, Gavin.
If you said the same
Gavin, have you got a rock solid proof for us about the stone, Gavin?
I've got stone proof. I don't.
I've got proof that Gavin's stoned, but that's a different. I'm teasing, Gavin. I'm teasing you. Get a sense of humor. I'm teasing you, man.
He's very serious. He's very from now. He's very serious, Damon. You can't do that anymore, too.
I know Gavin's not stoned because he's very sharp. So at the moment, what I'm saying is that Kevin said, Gav, that's what you missed. He said to me as the pit owner, it tripped on your stone. That's the perfect answer. It wouldn't have fallen in my pit if it never tripped on your stone. So that's a fair enough response. That's exactly it. Damn stone and fell on the stone is the same thing. You guys are both correct. So it's exactly the thing. They co-partners in terms of liability, okay? Exactly that. So the Gemara is going to unfold as follows. It says, The Gemara wonders why Rava needed to state this. It's obvious. The Gemara responds, you might have said that it's only there in the case where the one ox pushed another into the pit that the owner of the damaging ox shares liability according to Rav Nassan and is fully liable according to the rabbis. Okay? But why? Because the owner of the pit can tell the owner of the damaging ox, if not for my pit, your ox would have killed the damaged ox with the force of its blow. So the damaging ox is at least partly culpable. But here where the animal tripped over a stone, perhaps the owner of the stone can tell the owner of the pit, if not for your pit, what did my stone actually accomplish? If the ox had tripped over it, it would have fallen to the ground and stood up again. So the owner of the stone should not be liable at all. And then Rava therefore informs us that the owner of the stone is in fact liable. Why? Because exactly as Kevin and Gavin said, and Arthur too, if he wasn't riding, by the way, he would have said the same thing. Because the owner of the pit can retort, if not for your stone, the ox would not have fallen into the pit. Okay? So well done. The Gemara introduces a case that parallels our Mishnah's case, in which two parties collaborate to do damage, but only one of them can be held liable. It was stated. Okay? Now, Arthur, you can't answer, but I know you know the answers. There's a difference. Okay.
Of course, yes. I know everything.
So,
just Google it.
All right, guys.
You're the king. That's why, Arthur. You do know everything.
So the Gemara, guys, the Gemara is introducing a case that parallels our Mishnah. Dealing with a case where two parties collaborate to do damage, but only one of them can be held liable. So it was stated, okay? And we know on the 53 B1, so we at least we've finished A. Concerning the case when an ordinary ox and an ox that was a disqualified offering, which is exempt from paying damages, gored another animal together. And what is this disqualified offering that is exempt? It's a blemished firstborn ox which is not subject to redemption. Okay? So we're dealing with a case, again, where you cannot collect from the one party. We learned in the case before that you could not collect from the digger, classically. Why? Because it was grama, indirect, meaning the sounded that you never pushed in the ox. And in this case, there's another exemption. What's the exemption with the consecrated ox? Kev, because you did it
to the temple.
Yes, which means the pasuk is talking about.
It's not allowed. No one can use it. You can. You see, I went over this and I didn't read the notes. I was just trying to cover ground.
There's no problem. That's why I'm here. So basically, we learned many Mishnayot ago that you have to damage his fellow's ox. His fellow means your fellow Jew. If it belongs to the Most High, to Hashem, and it's consecrated, or it's for Kodesh, then you cannot you cannot extract liability from it. That's the bottom line. Does that make sense? So because of the exemption, now we got to find out if the other party has to pick up the slack or not, because now we're discussing the other part of Rav Nassan's statement. So again, Rav Nassan is unique from the rabbis in two perspectives, is that they're co-damages and they both share liability, whereas the rabbi says the initiator damager is the one that picks up full liability. Then the second part of Rav Nassan's statement is that where the one cannot pay, the other one picks up the shortfall. Okay? So now we're dealing with the second issue of what makes Rav Nassan different to the rabbis, whereas Rav Nassan saying, what are you talking about? There's no parties, there's no partners in any event, so why should the other one pick up the shortfall? The argument doesn't start. Does that make sense? So we're learning the second part now. We've dealt with the first. So it's using this example, and I'm just going to give you a little bit of a insight further. So what we're saying, though, is that any male firstborn ox or sheep or goat is automatically consecrated as a Bechor at birth. It's a firstborn. And it must be given to a Kohen. Gavin, a Kohen, are you listening, Hillel?
Very much.
Okay. So basically, Gavin the Kohen would offer it on the altar. Now, what happens if it develops a blemish? Gavin, you're a Kohen, you know the rules. What happens if it develops a blemish? Yes.
So what happens, I remember what I used to do. No, then I could take it home with me and eat it.
Exactly.
Can't be offered. Yeah.
Exactly.
So,
So
out with it, but you can take it home and eat it.
correct. So, there's a question that I've got to ask for you. So, since it's now developed a blemish, and it's ineligible to be sacrificed, and you can take it home with you to eat it, and it's disqualified as an offering because you can't offer a blemished Bechor, how is it now consecrated if it's disqualified? Okay. Okay, it's not redeemed. So you telling me now that okay, so you telling me now that any animal that's consecrated that cannot be used, you have to redeem. Is that correct?
No.
What are you telling me?
Yeah. No. All other animals, just the Bechor is the only one which you aren't able to redeem, period, even if it's a blemish. Whereby with the others consecrated, you can redeem it.
Okay.
It's not a firstborn. So if it's not a firstborn, you can redeem it, and then it becomes your property, and then then the two of you would be both responsible for the death of the other animal. So so that would be valid then. Whereby with this particular, with the Bechor, even though it's got a blemish, it can't be redeemed, period. So okay. It still doesn't have, it doesn't count. It's exempt as well, basically.
Okay, so exactly as Gavin said. What else were you going to say, Gavin? Because I'm saying something else now. Yeah.
I'm done.
No, I'm listening to you. If you have something to add, I'm always listening. Always. So what Gavin's saying is exactly right. The Bechor is unique. It's different than other potential offerings that become blemished. Why? Because other disqualified offerings must be redeemed before they may be eaten. That's the requirement. You cannot eat them unless they're redeemed. And upon redemption, they become the property of the one who redeemed them. So you're paying for them, right? The Bechor, by contrast, remains the property of the Most High, of Hashem. Okay? But this is the thing, Gavin. He permits the Kohen to eat it in its blemished state. And how do we know this? There's a verse in Shemot chapter 21, verse 35. Okay? Let's Arthur just join.
I wasn't watching. Was you on the whole time until now?
No, he wasn't.
I think he has bad reception there.
Yeah, I got shocking reception. Yeah.
He's got worse. He's at the hospital now.
Oh.
Okay, so Arthur, where did we lose you? Do you remember at all? Not really.
I just cut off. I was trying to get back, trying to reconnect.
Okay, what point did we finish with you? Did you lose us?
The part where you're screaming at us and how wonderful we were.
No, really. What point did I lose you?
I can't remember. I'll be honest. I was listening, and then.
All right, so I can do it in a 3-sentence summary. Okay, 3-sentence summary. Okay, so we're learning about Rav Nassan's second principle, Arthur. The first principle was a principle that co-damages share liability, whereas the rabbi says the initiator of the damage, even if there's another party,
I don't know that part.
Full liability. The second part is Rav Nassan says what you cannot collect from one party due to an exemption, the other party picks up the shortfall. Okay? And what Gavin touched on yesterday, and I clarified, is that there are two opinions in the Gemara. The one opinion is if the one guy ducks and he doesn't pay the money or he doesn't have money, or he absconds, or whatever case may be, that the other party picks up the shortfall. That's according to some of the rabbis, well, not the rabbis that agree with the rabbis that agree with Rav Nassan. so those that agree with Rav Nassan, some say that on those grounds, the other one picks up the shortfall, the co-damager. But the other opinions in the Gemara that still hold like Rav Nassan and said only with the Torah exemption, where the person is granted exemption by the Torah and not due to him evading his responsibility due to non-affordability or absconsion. In those cases, the partner doesn't pick up the shortfall. It's only when there's a Torah exemption on the one that the other party picks up the shortfall. So we learned two Torah exemptions. The one is grama, causative damage, or I like to say indirect damage, because when you use the word causative damage, if you cause it, you pay. It's confusing. You'd say, why not pay? So let's use the word indirect damage for grama. And the other one is that when something is consecrated, like a bechor, and it belongs to Hashem, then anything belonging to Hashem doesn't have to pay for damage. Okay, so now the one ox was in a consecrated state, and the other one was owned by an ordinary Jew. So now that we want to find out, does the ordinary Jew pick up the shortfall here or not? Is it like the case of the digger? Because there was an exemption for indirect damage. So what we've been doing when you clicked on the link is that Gavin, as our esteemed Cohen and teacher, has taught us that a bechor is unique. It's not like the other sacrifices that can be redeemed. A bechor, if it develops a mum, a blemish, can never be redeemed as such. Or let's just say that there is opinion that it can be redeemed, but the reality is you can't. And actually, I would agree with Gavin by all opinions, because if it's deemed as belonging to the Most High, what happens is Hashem gives the Kohen permission to eat it, but it's as if he's eating from Hashem's table, from the Most High's table. It's not redeemed. You can't do anything with it, other than because it doesn't belong to the Kohen. The Kohen only has permission to eat from it from Hashem, but it is not the Kohen's, as Gavin quite rightly said. Is that what you said, Gab? Because that's the fact. Yeah, so it's seen in the case of a bechor that has a blemish that you are entitled to partake from it as a gift from Hashem, but it belongs to Hashem, and therefore it's not damaged by the ox of his fellow, and therefore the consecrated ox that cannot be redeemed doesn't have to pay for co-damages. That's what we're learning. Okay. And by the way, are there any other sacrifice that has not been redeemed yet? A bechor can never be redeemed. But any of the other ones that have not been redeemed also fall in that category.
Okay. Dame?
Yeah?
Okay. Can I ask you a question? If everything belongs to Hashem, okay, why don't you go get it from my father?
Because the two brothers are having a dispute and the father says, leave me out of it.
Ain't my monkey, ain't my circus.
Yeah, like when your two kids are fighting, I don't want to know, kids, sort it out, yeah.
Damon?
Yeah?
So this consecrated ox, did it horn? Did it knock another ox into the pit, and that one died? Is that the story here? It caused damage.
So in this particular,
was damage caused to it? What's this situation?
Well, you're talking here about a case where there are two oxes that are responsible for killing an ox. Okay, there's no pit in this particular case. This case is not a pit. It's two oxes it's two shores that join forces to kill another ox. Okay, so you can't collect from the one because it's consecrated, and you can collect from the other. So we basically want to know, if you can collect from the other, do you pay for the shortfall or not? Okay. So let's just go on, guys. I'm not going to use a lot of your time. I just want you to get this concept. And
maybe Tom comes into play also.
Absolutely, Tom does come into play. Indeed, it does. Okay. So I'm going to ask you guys some questions. I'm going to put the statement, and I'm going to ask you guys some questions. Okay. So we're looking now about rulings that were issued to the extent of liability borne by the ordinary ox's owner. A buyer said he pays half damages and the damaged party loses the other half. Ravina says he pays 1/4 damages and the damaged party loses 3/4. So now the Gemara is going to explain the basis of these rulings. Both this ruling and that ruling refer to a case where the ordinary ox was a tum. Excellent, Kevin. Excellent. Okay. But this one, Ravina's ruling rules that he pays 1/4 damages, accords with the rabbis, whereas the other one, Abaya's ruling, that he pays half damages, accords with Rav Nassan. So, guys, do you want me to, can you give it back to me? I just want to see if you've understood it.
Kevin?
You go.
Give it a try, Kevin. Give it a try. What you do it?
Time actually. Okay, I can try, but I may not be correct.
Try. I like that.
I'm not going to give Rav Nassan. I'm just going to say, just going to try and make a comment. I'm not going to give any Tanoim or Amoraim as okay. I'm just saying. So basically, I think. Okay, I know Rav Nassan usually says both parties are liable. That's what he usually says. Because if it's tum, it's usually half damages, so each party would pay 1/4. But because the consecrated ox, the one that the other one that caused the damage of the other one, nothing can be claimed from it or its owner, then possibly the other ox's owner has to pay the full 50%.
Okay, so what I'm going to do is this is the only part I want Arthur to go on the camera, because I'm going to be sharing my screen, because I think it's easier before you work out the 4 different options, is that you at least have the one in writing. I think it's going to make your job a little bit easier. Okay. All right. I want you, Kevin, to read it.
Okay. Abaya said, okay, owner. Is it talking about the owner?
No, forget about the word owner. Just go, I couldn't cut off the word. Go from Abaya.
Abaya said he pays half damages and the damaged party loses the other half. Ravina said he pays 1/4 damages and the damaged party loses 3/4. Gemara explains the basis for these rulings. Both this ruling and that ruling refer to a case where the ordinary ox was a tum. But this one, Ravina's ruling that he pays 1/4 damages, accords with the rabbis. Whereas that one, Abaya's ruling that he pays half damages, accords with Rav Nassan.
Okay, so let me then ask a question more specifically. How is it that if Ravina's ruling according to the rabbi that you pay 1/4 damages, how does Ravina's ruling works? How does it work? Explain to me the case.
Because it's half of a half.
Okay, that's reasonable. That's reasonable. You're paying half of a half, okay. And with Rav Nassan, according to Abaya, how come you're paying 3/4?
Because the 1/4 from the consecrated ox is lose it. It doesn't have to be paid. So the 3/4 has to go to the other damaging ox.
Okay. So then what you're saying is then why wouldn't you pay half? You do, because he pays half damages according to Rav Nassan. So the thing of it is, according to Ravina, this is where you guys mustn't get confused. You see, according to Ravina, he pays 1/4 damages and the damaged party loses 3/4. This is according to a buyer where it's split half and half. So what I heard before is that concept where it seemed as though there was 1/4 damages and 3/4. It's not like that. Obviously, if you're paying 1/4 damage, the damaged party loses 3/4. But the other way to work it out is they each pay half, according to Rav Nassan. Does that make sense, Gav? In other words, what we're saying is as follows: is according to the rabbis, the private ox, not the consecrated ox, the private ox pays half of what the Talmud ordinarily pay, 1/4 damages. Okay, because say he didn't have a partner in the damage, and he created all of the damage, what would he pay if it was muad? No, if it was muad, he paid full. Right, exactly. And if it was tam, how much would he pay? According to the rabbis, correct. So now with this partnership, how much would he pay?
If it's tam or muad. If it's tam, each pays 1/4 to make up a half.
Correct, because what's happening is if he had no partner in the damage, this is how you got to see it in your mind according to the rabbis. He would pay the full payment. If it's time, he pays half the payment. Okay? Now, if there was a partner in the damage, he'd only pay 1/4. Okay? So that's something to bear in mind. But what you've also got to bear in mind is that the damaged party is unable to recover anything from the partner because it's sacred, right? So the owner of the ox is not required to pick up the slack. Okay? Why? Because if you hold according to the rabbis, there's no slack that's put up. So the damaged party would lose that other amount. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay. Good. All right. So I'm going to now start to ask you questions. So basically, Ravina's ruling is that obviously he holds according to the rabbis that you pay 1/4 damages. Okay. Now I have a question, Gavin, on Ravina's ruling according to this Gemara. What do you think my question is?
On Ravina, about the quarter.
Yeah, because Ravina is going according to the rabbis. That's what we shared in terms of the screen, right? Let me show you my question.
Your question is probably why did the rabbis not? You would have paid half anyway.
So what I'm saying is as follows. If you're saying that the ordinary ox is a tam, and Ravina is holding according to the rabbis turn around and say that there's no partnership. It's the one that originally caused the damage.
No.
Does that make sense? The only reason why this is different in this case is that we're not talking about a case where there's a pit and an attacking ox. We're talking about 2 oxen. That's why it has to bring this case of 2 oxen, because this wouldn't apply if there was a case of a pit and an ox, because the pit is passive, Gavin. You get what I'm saying? It could never occur in that case, because Ravina is going half according to Rav Nassan and half according to the rabbis. And the reason being is that you have to see that he's going according to the rabbis, because the rabbis hold like Rav Nassan in a case where an animal is a co-damager, but it cannot occur with a passive damager. That's what I'm trying to say.
Damon?
Yeah?
See what confuses, I know it says he, it doesn't tell you who the he is.
No, I know, but what I'm talking about is as follows, Gav. in a case where the rabbis can only hold the initiator liable. That's only in a case where you've got an attacking ox in a pit. Okay, because the dead ox was found in the pit. So the initiator will always be the attacking ox with a stone. But when two oxen gore simultaneously, they are partners. Then the rabbis would say, according to like Rav Nassan, that they are partners. In that aspect, they agree with Rav Nassan, because it's not a passive damager and an active damager. That's the point I wanted to bring across to you.
Thank you.
Am I making any sense? Otherwise, we would never award a quarter damager. Because say it was the case here of the pit, and Ravina agreed with the rabbis, okay? Then basically what would happen is that if it was a consecrated ox that did the damage, the owner of the pit would pay nothing because it's not the initiator, the attacking ox is, and the damaged party would get nothing because a consecrated ox is exempted. So the dead ox owner would get nothing. The only reason that he could, in this particular case, get what did we say? He could get 1/4 damages, is that we hold that they're two active damages. So again, if they're two oxen and the exemption is, so two oxen would pay half the damage each, okay? So that takes half the damage away from the exempted ox, and it leaves half the damage. Now, it would only pay half the damage because it's shared in the death. The force alone, it wouldn't be an entire damage on its own. They're co-damages, okay? Because we don't know which one, without the other, would have been lethal. They came at the same time. So therefore, if you would have paid full for Muad, and the consecrated ox would have paid full, we don't pay twice. So in that particular case, and we'll end on this note, we'll continue tomorrow, is that basically the consecrated ox pays nothing, and if it was muad, you would pay the other half, because each would pay half. You don't pay the damaged party twice. So you would split the costs where it's half and half for muad, because they co-damages. The rabbis even would agree with Rav Nassan because it's not a pit, which is a passive damager, and there's an initiator which pushes an ox in the pit. They both damage. So therefore, the consecrated ox pays nothing. The other one pays the other half, if it was muad. Since it's tam, it only pays 1/4. And since it only pays 1/4, the damaged party loses 3/4. Does that make sense? That's if they hold according to the rabbis. And the rabbi's ruling is that if there are two active damages, then they share, but the partner doesn't pick up the shortfall. If it's a buyer that holds according to Rav Nassan, we say as follows, is that if it was muad, each one would pay half, but the exempted ox, because it's consecrated, is out of the way, so the other half is paid... Let me explain. The other half, we're going to get to the quarter and a shortfall now. Just the other half, in principle, would be paid by the ordinary ox, but because it's tam, it actually pays. It pays 1/4. Okay, and what it does is it then picks up the other quarter of the damage from the consecrated ox, because the most it would have to pay, even according to Rav Nassan's rule, is half. It wouldn't have to pay more. It wouldn't have to make up a 3/4 damage, because if an ox is exempted, we don't hold the principle of tamu muad. Do you get what I'm saying? So the ordinary ox could never pay more than half anyway. In other words, if it was muad, it would have to pay full damages. It only has to pay half because it's tam. So that quarter calculation goes off if you're holding buyer. He's saying a buyer, let's look at it fresh from Rav Nassan. Okay? If the one has, each one pays half, and if it was muad, it's as though the other damager doesn't exist if he's exempted, and the other one would pick up and pay full damages. So if it was muad, the ordinary ox's owner would pay full damages, because it's as if he had no partner that was exempted to pick up 50% of his overhead as a as a co-damager. But since it is tam, he only pays half. Why does he pay half? Because that other damager is out of the way. So instead of paying full damages, he pays half. So we don't work on the quarter equation anymore, according to a buyer. Do you see that? A buyer looks at it differently. So can anybody give over how a buyer looks at it, and then we can end?
So, but there's another way to look at a buyer, which I was trying to say, is that you can look at it that the one party would pay a quarter, and the consecrated ox would pay a quarter. So now you have to fill up that second quarter from the consecrated ox because he's exempt. So you take a quarter and a quarter, and that makes a half.
There's only one problem with that. I've thought about the same thing, and I thought it was good. The only flaw I could see of it from my point of view when I thought like that is we have no idea if the consecrated ox would be a tamil muad status, so you don't know what the shortfall is. The only thing you can do is actually exclude it as being a co-contributor to alleviate your the damage that you owe.
No, that's a good point. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Well picked up.
Yeah. So in other words, it's out of the picture. So now, since that ox is consecrated, he's not going to help you pay. You stuck. If it's muad, you pay everything, and if it's tam, you pay half.
Okay, 100%.
Okay. Good. We're done.